We're talking about many areas of the paranormal with Pamela Nance, who has been through a lot, but we'll take your calls this hour on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Noory back with Pamela Nance. Pamela, would you say that your degrees in anthropology and archaeology have helped you in the paranormal or not?
I think they have definitely helped me in that they gave me the research background to go into an investigative site knowing the complete history about the land and the families that occupied the land and the homes, and just having that research methodology and the layering approach that I took from the archaeological field work really resonated with that group of, historic populations that were very anxious to communicate across these sites. So applying that anthropological ethnographic approach of not really going into a site to learn about, any type of scary haunting, but to actually learn from the populations about their daily lives. What did they do for a living? What types of foods did they eat? What games did the children play? That really resonated with these people who seemingly were not deceased. They were intelligent, interactive populations that wanted to talk about themselves, as most people do.
Sure.
So going in with all of that information, the genealogy, the history of the land, I walked away with just phenomenal evidence that I was able to then research on the back end and validate and provide information to the property owners and the management about things that they had questions about on the property.
Do you think you were ever an abductee by ETs?
Oh, yes. I had a missing time event in 2015.
What happened there?
After I met Stanton and he introduced me to Kathleen, Kathleen and I communicated for a couple of years, and she was very interested in the paranormal approach as it would apply to, say, a site where an ET abduction had occurred or ET activity occurred. And she said it would be, interesting to see how your approach would resonate with that population. And so she connected me with an individual in the eastern part of North Carolina in the Cape Fear River Valley who had a number of years of ET activity and abduction. And so I went there and applied my paranormal methodology to that site and ended up with 2 hours of missing time.
2 hours of missing time, and you have no idea what happened?
No, I have a very good idea of what happened. As a matter of fact, I had all of my transcommunicational equipment with me, as well as a video camera with night vision, and so the evidence was collected on those devices, and it became quite evident after that investigation that evening that something unusual had occurred. I went out at 10 o'clock that night to begin the investigation in an area of the yard where a number of incidences had taken place, so I thought that would be a good location to set up my equipment, and began the investigation with the property owner and my investigative partner, asking questions as we normally would, and we heard real-time electronic voice phenomena coming through on our device, indicating that there were there was a craft at the moon, and saying that they were back above us, talking about who's in charge of the ship. And so this went on for some time, these real-time EVPs coming through, and we're standing there, myself, my partner, and the property owner, and we see a bright object to the left of the moon, and clearly it's not a star, and we're hearing these EVPs come through. And then my next recall is we're standing there, the bright object is gone, and our equipment is no longer in our hands. It's on the ground behind us, turned off, and we all feel sick, kind of dizzy and nauseous. But the video camera had continued to record, the video camera with night vision. We returned to the property owner's house, and his wife was rather frantic because it was now 1 o'clock in the morning. So we'd gone out at 10. It felt like we had only been out there about an hour, and she's saying it's 1 in the morning. And so over the next few days and weeks, as my partner and I reviewed the evidence, it became apparent that we had almost 2 hours of missing time because my recorder recorded for an hour and 15 minutes that would have taken us to 11:15, yet we did not go inside until 1 in the morning. And then the video camera yielded just some incredible, evidence of, like, photographic evidence of who was there, as well as the audio that was captured on the video camera, indicating that we were being abducted.
That's amazing. Let's take some calls for you. Let's start by going to Dave in Colorado to get us started. Hello, David. Go ahead.
Hey, George. Thank you. I want to know your guest's opinion about music. It's frequency. It's a musical note, and prayer. The correlation between the two. I know a lot of prayers are sung in music, but I say the Our Father and the Hail Mary, part of the Rosary, every night. And to me, it's like a song when I say it. And then when I listen to music like, yes, John Denver mostly, makes me look at nature and all of creation. And it gives me an enlightenment and an elevation in my spirit that lifts me. And it's so inspiring. I live here in the San Luis Valley, and, I see a lot of weird things, but then I'm going, well, maybe it's just part of all of that. And George, I have a personal question for you, if you don't mind, not too personal. Does your sister ever visit you? Has her life force ever come to you?
The one who passed on? No,
yeah.
It has not happened yet, David. Not yet.
Well, maybe she's taking her time, bro.
You got that right, my friend. You got that right. Prayer and music, Pamela, does that fit into anything that you do?
It really doesn't fit into anything that I do, but in a broader sense, any time that you focus your intention, be it through prayer or through musical vibration, that is what can tap you into this higher consciousness, and I think that it can be measured through hertz, and we know that there are tons of meditational music available online that you can listen to that taps into different frequencies within your brain, into the waves. We have the beta, alpha, theta, delta wavelengths in our brain, and so I think these different hertz can tap into that, and music is certainly capable of doing that and changing your frequency, and then just your intention set through prayer. It certainly, can work together.
Do you find sometimes, Pamela, that the one is just as strong as the many when it comes to prayer? That one strong prayer from an individual could just about do whatever a prayer of, let's say, 10,000 people praying for the same thing?
Absolutely. I've experienced that myself. Once in my lifetime, I actually had a prayer answered. And so I know that at the deepest level, that sincere prayer and connection, with that higher creator can certainly yield results.
Let's go to Tom in La Jolla, California. Tom, hello there.
Hi, George. Thank you. Pamela, you're bringing some very interesting life experiences to the table. I thank you. And I have a comment and then a question about things that you said earlier in the interview. The comment is you talked about on the other side. You saw the tree of life and experienced it. And I'm reminded of the Old Testament in Genesis, starting with verse 22. The tree of life, if you eat of the tree of life, it confers immortality, physical immortality. And I'm also reminded of your experiences where you were talking about how everything seems so vibrant. And I think of the New Testament, which talks about a new heaven, a new earth. Which brings me to my question. When we talk about the ascension, can we access the ascension not through disease, not through, physical death like a car accident, that type of thing, but by choice, and experience that immortality, the tree of life, and experience that new heaven and new earth? I was wondering if you would expand on that. And again, thank you for what you do, Pamela.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful question. Yes, I think that that all living beings have a higher consciousness, and that comes from the Creator, and we're all part of the same Creator. And we, if we recognize that, we can connect with that higher frequency and vibration. And I certainly like those verses that you bring forth from the Old and the New Testament, because we do have the ability to change the outcome on our planet if we so desire. And if, as a collective humankind, if we can raise that consciousness planetary-wise, we can change things. And it's a matter of, seeing each other as brothers and sisters related to this higher creator that's responsible for all life, not only here but throughout the universe. And we do have the ability to change things.
Pam, do you still use your psychic abilities, the abilities that you started as a kid?
I do, but it comes to me. It's really nothing that I sit down and try to bring forth. Things come to me in dreams primarily. I have lots of dreams that are, tend to turn out to be true, and I often share those with my husband before the events happen. And then I sometimes do have spontaneous information that comes through. And if I feel that I should share that with someone, then I do.
And when you share it, how do they react to it?
Usually with stunned silence, particularly if it hits a note of being true for them. And I'm fortunate in that most of my friends and support group are like-minded people and don't see me, as someone with 3 heads or, a weirdo. So I'm fortunate in that sense.
What is the strangest thing that's happened to you?
There's been so many things, but the strangest thing I would say would be the missing time event. There's just so much about that has still yet to be determined about the missing time and how it appeared that from the audio evidence we overlapped ourselves in time. So there's a period on the recording where there is a sound of a craft and we're talking about being brought back and we don't want to be back, and an electronic voice tells us to step out of the craft, yet at the same time you can hear us under this tree where we were doing the investigation, conducting the investigation. And that piece of audio was captured within the first 10 minutes of being out in the yard that evening. So that's one of the strangest things, that we had an overlap in time.
And you had witnesses, didn't you?
Yes. Yes, there was myself and 2 other people. And then, of course, the photographic and the audio evidence, to back it up.
It's important to have the witnesses, isn't it? You got to have them. Pamela, give out your website.
PamelaNance.com.
And the Ascension book with William Henry is now available as well, right?
It is. It is available on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Sacred Stories Publishing, most any of, outlets that carry.
We're going to come back in a moment with Pamela Nance and take final phone calls as we talk about her life in the paranormal field. So jump aboard with a question or two or your own experiences when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. And we'll be back with final calls with Pamela Nance in just a moment on Coast to Coast. On our next Coast to Coast program, Brandon Weichert joins us to talk about unidentified aerial phenomena and how he believes they may be coming from this planet. They might be our technology. Think about that. And then Lloyd Auerbach joins us to talk about hauntings and poltergeists on Coast to Coast. And welcome back, George Noory with Pamela Nance, our final segment here. Pamela, how far back do you think the ancients went with their knowledge of what we've been talking about tonight?
I think it goes back tens of thousands of years. If you look at, the ancient sites around the world, Göbekli Tepe, for instance.
Sure.
That's considered to be one of the world's oldest temples that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. And so there's sort of a spiritual, religious aspect to that site. So if it's, 9,000 BC, we're talking, 12,000 years ago. And potentially even further back as new sites are unearthed, and as we learn more about our roots as human beings. We've, I think in the past 20 years, an additional 20 species have been added to the family tree. So I think as we go forward, and as science is broadening its viewpoint into the origins of mankind on the planet, we'll discover even more ancient connections.
All right, let's go to the phones. Walter in Pennsylvania, get us going here. Walt, go ahead.
Hi, George. George, with all due respect to Pamela, a lot of these near-death experiences sound like what the old recall the old 1960 Timothy Leary hippies used to say after returning from an LSD trip, George, as we know that the human brain is its own pharmacy, its own drug pusher, if you will, and it's constantly manufacturing dopamines and endorphins, and this is what we biochemically we construct what we call reality from. Now, as I said, in my view, the human animal is the only animal on the planet that is aware of death, that is too proud, if you will, to die. So I think that in the throes of death, our brains concoct these what you might call biochemical placebos to make the going easier, to assuage the fear of death.
Well, probably in some cases that's absolutely true, Walt, but not in all of them, as Pamela would testify. Right, Pam?
Right. And, I would encourage your listeners to explore Eben Alexander, who was a trained... Proof
of heaven.
Right, exactly. He had the same opinion that these were just, the neurons and firing in the brain, trying to make sense of what's happening to you at the time of death. But he had a life-changing experience of his own in which he met a sister that he did not know about, and that was validated when he returned out of the coma that he had gone into as a result of being extremely ill. And so, there are tons of stories out there that have, been validated to a certain degree by physicians and scientists, and, a whole body of work by Raymond Moody, that gives some, validity to the area of NDE.
Absolutely. Chris in Milwaukee. Hey, Chris, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Oh, hey, thanks. Yeah, I was calling. So I was wondering a very specific thing that was mentioned regarding the rhesus factor, or RH factor in blood.
Yeah.
And its relationship to Atlantis. And I'm just trying to kind of wrap my head around it, because my understanding is that that's pretty solid science in terms of the fact that it's not just humans that have that, right? I mean, that's obviously rhesus monkeys, hence the name rhesus factor. Other old world monkeys, chimpanzees, other great apes all share this factor. And from what I've seen, the population distribution of that is pretty consistent with what you would see genetically in other population distributions for genetic variation.
Well, Pamela, what about the blood type?
Well, my understanding is that, the name was given by research that was done decades ago, and with a doctor looking at the blood in a rhesus macaque monkey, and found that a protein existed on the surface of the red blood cells, and that, then they were able to translate that over to human blood, that if you have this protein RHD on the surface of the red blood cell, then you're positive, and if you don't have it, you're negative. That, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're related to this rhesus macaque monkey. It's just the name that was given to that protein at the time of its discovery.
Maybe the monkey's related to us, right?
Right. Although we do share, a fair bit of our DNA with chimpanzees, 98%, I think. But I think that, it's a sort of a different area of blood for humans. And, I'm not a scientist or a doctor in that area. I know what my blood type is and what I've researched and found, and that there, in the world population, there's only a 15% of the population that has the Rh negative.
Let's go to Ed in Oregon. Welcome to the program, Eddie. Go ahead.
Greetings, George. Thank you very much for your program tonight, and appreciate your comments and guests tonight. And I wanted to thank you for your guest the other night, Ralph Ellis. His clarity on CO2 was greatly appreciated, and I thank you for everything you've done. And I was able to cancel my EV order for an electric vehicle after hearing Mr. Ellis. Anyway, and I appreciated your comments tonight about your last interviews, Stanton Freeman, Jimmy Hoffa, and your guest earlier.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to thank you guys for all you do, you and Tom and everybody connected with the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Very kind of you to say that. Isn't that nice, Pam?
That is nice.
Brendan in Austin, Texas. Take it away, Brendan.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Bren.
George, and thank you. This show's been really fun to listen to. I'm doing some spring cleaning. I'm like scrubbing the baseboards listening to it. It's been really fun.
You work late, Brendan, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Well, I'm not at work right now. I'm at home. I'm spring cleaning at home.
That's still work.
Yeah, that's true. Pamela, you mentioned the audio overlay of the video earlier and that the night vision kept on going. What was on the video? Because I imagined y'all together huddling, staring at each other blankly, kind of like the scene in the Blair Witch Project in the basement. I was super creeped out at that. My hair was like standing on my arm. So what was on the video?
Well, what ended up being on the video was about a 90-second segment that showed two beings that were in this catalpa tree where we had positioned ourselves under to conduct the investigation. And this particular tree had been the center of activity on that property previously. But what the video camera captured was what appears to be about a 6-foot being sitting up in the branches of the tree, dressed in like a black bodysuit with what appears to be some type of headgear on the head, and then a smaller being materializes down at the bottom of the frame at the base of the tree, comes in as a small orb, and then morphs into a very small humanoid-looking being that appears to have some type of energy source attached to him, and he shoots up into this tree and lands on the larger being's shoulder. And so this was a very fast segment in this video that Kathleen Martin spent weeks analyzing and pulling out the photographic pieces, and those are on my website under the Evidence 1 tab. You can go in and look at that photographic evidence with an explanation.
I was looking at that tonight. Pamela, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for being on the show. Keep in touch. This is your first time on the program, isn't it?
It is, and I really appreciate you having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it, George. I'll come back anytime that you like.
Pam's website, PamelaNance.com, is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. For Adam Thompson, Dan Galante, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladesor, Stephanie Smith, Chris Burrows, Tim Banal, George Knapp, and Ian Punnett